Imagine a family that ruled a small corner of South Carolina for over a century, wielding law and legacy like a weapon. On a humid night in June 2021, that dynasty shattered with 2 shotgun blasts. This is the story of the Murdaughs, a legal powerhouse whose name once commanded absolute fear and respect. But behind the Spanish moss and Southern charm lay a rotting core of corruption, addiction, and blood. How did a kingdom built on justice end in a double homicide? To understand the murders, we must travel back to 2019, to a dark river and a boat full of teenagers. Paul Murdaugh, the youngest son of the prominent family, was at the helm. Fueled by alcohol and a sense of invincibility, he ignored the pleas of his friends to slow down. The night ended in a violent collision against a bridge, throwing several passengers into the freezing water. It was the first crack in the family's untouchable facade. Among those on the boat was Mallory Beach, a 19-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her. While the others survived, Mallory vanished into the dark currents. It took days for her body to be recovered, leaving a community devastated and angry. The crash wasn't just a tragedy, it was a scandal. Rumors swirled that the Murdaugh family used their immense influence to obstruct the investigation at the hospital, attempting to protect Paul from the looming legal consequences. For 3 generations, the Murdaughs served as the solicitors of the 14th Circuit. This meant they were the chief prosecutors for a massive region, holding the power to decide who went to prison and who walked free. In Hampton County, the name Murdaugh was synonymous with the law itself. People knew that if you crossed them, you lost. This ingrained power dynamic created an environment where the family felt they were above the rules everyone else had to follow. On June 7, 2021, the world changed forever. Alex Murdaugh called 911, his voice trembling with panic. He claimed he had just arrived at the family's sprawling hunting estate, Moselle, to find his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, shot to death near the dog kennels. The scene was gruesome and chaotic. 2 members of the most powerful family in the state were dead, and the investigation immediately drew national headlines. Was this a targeted hit or something more sinister? As investigators processed the scene at Moselle, questions began to outnumber answers. Maggie was found near the kennels, killed with an assault rifle, while Paul had been shot with a shotgun at close range. There were no signs of a struggle or a break-in at the main house. The sheer violence of the act suggested a deep-seated rage. While Alex presented himself as a grieving widower, the community began to wonder about the skeletons hidden in his family's closet. The murders of Maggie and Paul reopened old wounds and long-buried mysteries. Suddenly, people started talking about Stephen Smith, a young man found dead on a rural road in 2015. His death was initially ruled a hit-and-run, but many in the town believed a Murdaugh was involved. The investigation into the double homicide at Moselle acted as a catalyst, forcing the authorities to look back at every suspicious event linked to the family name over the past decade. Then there was the case of Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh's loyal housekeeper for over 20 years. In 2018, she reportedly tripped over the family dogs and fell down the stairs at their home, later dying from her injuries. At the time, it was treated as a tragic accident. As the financial investigation deepened, the image of Alex Murdaugh as a successful attorney began to crumble. Just months after the murders, a bizarre incident occurred on a roadside that left everyone baffled. Alex Murdaugh claimed he was shot in the head while changing a tire. However, the story quickly fell apart. It was revealed that Alex had hired a former client to kill him so his surviving son, Buster, could collect a $10 million life insurance policy. The botched assisted suicide was a desperate move by a man whose web of lies was finally unraveling. The roadside shooting was the final straw. Alex Murdaugh was arrested and charged with a litany of financial crimes, but the big question remained: was he responsible for the deaths of his wife and son? For over a year, the public waited for answers. Finally, in July 2022, a grand jury indicted Alex for the murders of Maggie and Paul. The trial that followed would be one of the most watched and analyzed legal proceedings in modern American history. The prosecution's case centered on a digital smoking gun. Paul Murdaugh had recorded a video on his phone at the dog kennels just minutes before he was killed. In the background, a voice could be heard, a voice that multiple witnesses identified as Alex Murdaugh. This contradicted Alex's firm claim that he was nowhere near the kennels at the time of the murders. This video placed him at the scene of the crime during the critical window of time. During the trial, the defense argued that Alex was a loving father and husband who could never commit such a heinous act. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence, such as the murder weapons, which were never found. They suggested that the real killers were still at large, perhaps seeking revenge for the 2019 boat crash. Alex himself took the stand, admitting to his financial crimes and lies, but adamantly denying that he harmed his family. The prosecution painted a different picture. They argued that Alex was a desperate man whose financial world was collapsing. On the day of the murders, he had been confronted by his law firm about missing funds. They claimed he killed Maggie and Paul to create a distraction, hoping to gain sympathy and buy himself more time to fix his financial mess. To them, the murders were a cold, calculated move by a man trapped in his own greed. Hampton County was a place where the Murdaughs were once feared, but the trial saw the community come together to seek the truth. The courtroom was packed daily, and the local population followed every detail with bated breath. For many, this wasn't just about one man, it was about the end of an era of feudal power. The myth of Murdaugh invincibility was being tested in the very courtrooms where they had once reigned supreme for many generations. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, a wave of shock and relief swept through the state. Alex Murdaugh, the man who had spent his life prosecuting others, was now a convicted murderer. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The dynasty was officially dead, and the man who once held the keys to the county was headed to a maximum security prison cell. Netflix's documentary, Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal, brought this complex web of events to a global audience. It highlighted not only the crimes but the cultural context of the Lowcountry. Through interviews with survivors, investigators, and former friends, the series exposed how deep the family's roots went. It showed how a small-town tragedy could reveal the systemic failures of a legal system that allowed one family to operate without oversight for so long. Justice was finally served. Even after the verdict, the Murdaugh saga continues to evolve. New investigations into the deaths of Stephen Smith and Gloria Satterfield are ongoing. The scale of Alex's financial crimes is still being mapped out, with many victims still waiting for restitution. The story has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the lengths a person will go to maintain a facade of respectability. It serves as a reminder that the truth always surfaces eventually. Buster Murdaugh, the only surviving son, remains a figure of public curiosity. Having lost his mother and brother, and seen his father convicted of their murders, his life is forever marked by the scandal. He has consistently maintained his father's innocence in the murders, despite the evidence presented in court. The emotional toll on the extended family and the survivors of the boat crash is immeasurable, leaving a community struggling to heal from years of trauma and deceit. The Murdaugh legal firm, once the most prestigious in the region, has been rebranded and restructured. The name that once brought prestige is now a stain they are trying to wash away. Former partners and colleagues have had to distance themselves from the legacy of Alex Murdaugh. The fall of the firm symbolizes the total collapse of the Murdaugh empire, proving that even a century of influence cannot protect you from the consequences of cold-blooded murder and fraud. What makes this story so compelling is the contrast between the southern charm and the brutal reality of the crimes. The Murdaughs lived a life of privilege, hunting on vast estates and hosting social events, while secretly harboring a history of exploitation. It's a real-life Southern Gothic horror story. The Netflix series captured this duality, showing the world that behind the polite smiles and expensive suits, a monster was hiding in plain sight, fueled by greed. As we look back on the timeline of events, from the 2015 death of Stephen Smith to the 2023 conviction, the patterns of behavior are clear. It was a slow-motion train wreck that everyone saw coming but no one could stop. The influence of the Murdaughs acted like a shield, preventing justice for years. It took a tragedy as massive as the double homicide at Moselle to finally break the spell and bring the family's dark secrets into the light. The Murdaugh murders will be remembered as a landmark case in true crime history. It exposed the vulnerabilities of small-town justice and the power of investigative journalism and digital evidence. For the victims, including Mallory Beach, Stephen Smith, Gloria Satterfield, Maggie, and Paul, the path to the truth was long and painful. While Alex Murdaugh spends the rest of his life behind bars, the impact of his actions will be felt in South Carolina for many years to come. The Murdaugh story is more than a true crime sensation, it is an autopsy of power in the American South. From the dark waters of a late-night boat crash to the sterile fluorescent lights of a courtroom, the truth proved stranger than any fiction. As the gavel fell, a century of dominance ended, leaving behind a trail of victims seeking peace. The scandal remains a chilling reminder that even the most fortified dynasties can crumble when the light finally finds the shadows.